going to hear all about Oxford House. Oxford House is a network of recovery homes that's throughout the United States, Australia, and Canada, and they serve the alcoholism and drug addiction problem in people who are recovering. Now, to tell us all about this and make us clear on the subject, I would like to introduce Gordon Ness, who is going to fill us in on a great many of the details about the Oxford House. Gordon is the Housing Service Chairman for the state of Virginia. But Gordon has some connections here in Marin County because Gordon is my son. So some of you may recognize Gordon because he grew up and went to school in Marin. Maybe we can talk about that a little later, some of your exploits in Marin, Gordon. But I would like for you to tell us about Oxford House now.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thanks for the nice introduction. I am originally from the Bay Area, and I moved to Virginia in 1999. I am an alcoholic, and I am in recovery now, but in 2002, after a long period of sobriety, I underwent a series of surgeries that involved a lot of exposure to pain medication. And that eventually was something I thought I could handle but could not. It led to a relapse to alcohol again, and that's when I was introduced to Oxford House. It was not my first choice, but doing a little research, I knew I wasn't in need of a full treatment program, but I also didn't want to be on my own, and Oxford House provides that kind of a transition environment. Right now there are currently 1,200 Oxford houses throughout the United States, Australia, and Canada. There are 65 in Virginia, where I am from, Williamsburg, Virginia. And it started in 1975, this concept, where our founder, Paul Malloy, who is still our CEO, was living in a traditional halfway house with counseling staff and cooks and other staff members. And what they saw was, after this prescribed 30-day treatment, you're out the door, and they saw people continuing to relapse over and over after this short period of time, and this concerned them. And when they found that the halfway house they were living in was about to lose their lease, they decided collectively, this group of 7 or 8 men, to take the lease over themselves. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they determined how much they needed to each contribute weekly to rent to make this thing work, and they learned that they could not afford any staff, so they decided to run it themselves, which is pretty much unheard of. Probably the biggest single key decision they made was to eliminate any kind of time limit. Their decision was people recover at different rates, and as long as you remained free from alcohol or drugs, you could stay in an Oxford House until you were ready to leave. And I think this is probably the single biggest key to Oxford's success. Again, there was recently a study, a long-term study released by DePaul University that confirmed what we already knew, and that is we are the single most successful organization of our type in the field of alcoholism and drug addiction treatment. Their recovery rates for our residents were between 65 and 87% on these 2 studies, which are, for those of you who know anything about numbers in this field, very, very good. The system of operations for an Oxford House is basically you've got a single-family home that is attempted to be located in a good neighborhood away from the elements that might drag you back into your old behaviors. You are the only residents in an Oxford House are the recovering addicts and alcoholics themselves. They are self-supporting through their own rent. They make all decisions as to the running of the house. There are positions that must be filled, president, comptroller, secretary, and so forth. And all financial decisions made, decisions to buy a new dryer, to pay this bill or that bill, are all made by the residents, as are decisions on who might move into that house. they have control over that. Every person has one vote. There are no one in that house has any privileges just because they've been there longer. The only benefit of being in an Oxford house a long time is your selection of the best bedroom, perhaps. So there is also a strong emphasis on the 12-step programs. As an example, Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous.
And there's a requirement that they go. That's one of their requirements?
There is a requirement during a probationary period that you attend a set number of meetings. There are also random drug and alcohol screens that are performed in the houses by the residents, again, by the residents themselves. I think in addition to the programs that are set up, these 12-step programs and the rules of the houses and the benefit that you can stay there until you are ready to go, until you feel ready, there's a great synergy within the house that develops, a family environment. And this is for men and women, by the way. And this is a...
Not in the same house.
No, separate houses. That was tried, it didn't work out.
Oh, I see.
There are no co-ed houses. But this family environment where everybody really cares about each other, and at the same time they're all pulling towards the same direction, recovery, and they can see behaviors that might happen before somebody relapses and bring it to their attention. They might, and that's one of the things that you're asked when you try to get into an Oxford house is, what are your relapse triggers? What might cause you to go back to your old behaviors? And then when you come into the house, if those behaviors become evident, the residents know. Hey, he said if he was getting ready to drink again, he might isolate, or he might stop going to the gym, or he might cut down on his meetings, and that's what's happening. And we bring it to their attention, the residents bring it to the person's attention, and they may furthermore require that he increases meetings and provide documentation of that.
And when you do these random tests, if you are found to have alcohol in your system, that's it.
Yeah, there's a zero tolerance for alcohol or drug use in an Oxford house. If you are tested and found to be positive, you typically have 30 to 45 minutes to clear out. You are able to come back and get the rest of your belongings within the next 30 days, but those are the consequences, and everybody knows them. And even though you're friends and you develop these close bonds, that's a line that no one crosses, and you don't have to be tested to be evicted. If you're exhibiting behaviors that are destructive or disruptive to the house, and the residents as a democratic family, again, one vote per person, they decide that you've been using or drinking, then you can be asked to leave. That's not the end of the road. We try never to say never in Oxford, but it is the end of the road for that house at that time. And we've seen people who are able to leave the house, go back into treatment, get some solid recovery going again, and then reapply. So
you do take them back then for another try after a period of time?
Yes, I mean, I don't know of too many people that got this recovery thing right the first time around.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that I did, but it takes what it takes for people, and Oxford is there to try to help them transition back into society. Our role is a facilitator to reconnect with society, and the ultimate plan of success is to move in, get your meetings, get your program straightened out, and oftentimes really learn how to live life again. People coming into Oxford are often out there for years drinking and using drugs and behaving badly. They don't bathe, they don't pay their bills, they don't live correctly, they don't own a vehicle. They're sometimes operating beneath the radar of society, and Oxford is there to help them reconnect, to help them be responsible. Again, with the positions that each person holds, they're all important positions because the house survives solely on the money that's collected from the rent of the residents. And so you're required to be employed.
I think that would be almost insurmountable if you go through a treatment period, feel that you're fine, and your advisors and the professional people feel that you can go out into the world, and then all of a sudden you have to find an apartment and arrange for a telephone and contact the utility service, and it seems like it would be a lot onto a person who's been through a traumatic experience. So I think your houses help people in that way. They can just move in and start living.
Well, I think so, and I think that's where many times traditional treatment fails us, because you are in a situation where you've lived a certain way for a long time, and then all of a sudden you're sent into a program for 28 days and expected to be re-emerged from that ready to tackle life. And the truth is that you're not, in most cases, ready to go again. I would say that people who do go through 30-day programs, as opposed to people who come to Oxford off the street, have a better success rate, but that doesn't mean that a person walking into Oxford off the street can't do it, because it happens all the time. Like I said, there's over 1,200 houses. It started in '75 with one and has proliferated since. There is, unfortunately, in California, just one Oxford house in Southern California.
Oh.
This was started by an alumni member, and I think that we view California as a very progressive state in terms of willingness to spend money on rehabilitation as opposed to incarceration. Obviously that's the wisest way to go. Just to kind of throw a number out there, in Washington, for example, we have 120, Washington State, we have 120 Oxford houses. In Oregon, we have 100, so just our neighbors here. And to get something going with it for Oxford, I believe our contract in Washington State is $350,000, which isn't a big number for a state the size of California.
And what is that for?
That money pays for outreach workers who are in charge of opening houses.
Oh, okay.
And that could staff 3 or 4 outreach workers to open houses in the state of California. The cost to open an average house is somewhere around $5,000. And usually that comes in the form of some type of revolving loan or some other funding. And just to give you a comparison, to operate a traditional halfway house with staff, counselors, etc., for a year, we estimate that to be around $750,000. You could take that $750,000 and open 1,500 Oxford houses at $5,000 each, and that money is used to secure first and last month's rent, furniture, connect your utility services, and a little buffer until you fill the house with residents and are able to stand on your own. And so we hope that California will look into this a little further, and we know that now that we have the validation that we all knew was true from DePaul University, we challenge anyone to come up with those kind of numbers. We know that the study found that the recovery rate for people going through just standard 28-day program treatment was only 31%. So if we can do double or more than that, I think it's something that we all should look at. My involvement, again, was started out simply as a resident in Oxford House, Chesapeake, Virginia, in January of 2004. Once I finally got corrective surgery that fixed my problem, which was a hip replacement.
Oh, wow.
That you're well aware of, Mother.
Yes. I know people who get hip replacements and they say they go out dancing a week later, but Gordon couldn't go out dancing. He's kept popping out, and I know you had a really legitimate physical problem there, but then it worked its magic on you as far as your addiction problem.
Yeah, I don't blame my problems on that. That just happened to be something that happened, and the doctor, by the way, is no longer licensed to practice medicine in the state of Virginia. But in the course of all of that, I did relapse. I accept responsibility for that, and but I also made it back, and that's the biggest key. And I went into Oxford House Chesapeake, and I got involved. There are, again, Virginia as an example, there's 65 houses.
Wow.
And growing, and each of those houses belong to a chapter, a geographic area in which you might have 7 or 8 houses belong to this chapter, and then there is also a state association that does public relations and housing services for all the houses in the state. So when I was in that Oxford house in January, in March, my background being in marketing and public relations, I attended my first state association meeting in Richmond, Virginia, and was, to my surprise, elected as the public relations chairman for the state of Virginia for Oxford House. I published newsletters. That was the biggest thing I did, and I learned to market, if you will, Oxford House to community service boards, to the Salvation Armies, to probation departments, to attorneys, and the awareness that we try to create. And there are an amazing number of programs now in place with the community services boards, if you're not familiar, are organizations that help individuals with housing. They have counseling for substance abuse, and they are now cooperating with Oxford in terms of sending people to Oxford who need housing assistance, who are participating in their substance abuse programs. And oftentimes they will help the individuals with their move-in costs and monthly rent until they're able to be on their own feet. So this has been something that I got involved with in terms of meeting with these people. I make presentations out at veterans hospitals, at community service boards events. We host open houses. I go into prisons and talk to those people, because this way they have somewhere to go when they get out, other than back to the streets where they came from. Because unless you change people, places, and things, nothing changes. You go to prison, you do your time, and you come back out, you go right back where you were. What do you think is going to happen? The worst. And that's what is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we're trying to put a stop to that by giving some. We'll actually go into prisons and interview people and have them accepted conditionally, and then they go to the house and everybody meets them, and normally that will work out just fine. And we also hook them up with social services, so they have some resources and they have a place to go.
This is only if they're suffering an addiction, though, right?
Correct. Yeah. I should have clarified. We go in each prison. Or jail typically has some type of program that you can get involved with on a voluntary and sometimes involuntary basis. And we go talk to those individuals and explain to them their options once they leave. Just like the community services boards helps us by explaining to their clients what kind of option Oxford House offers them. It's not for everybody, but it is a valuable thing for someone who's in that situation where they've made a decision to make this change in their life, and yet they're not comfortable maybe being out on their own yet. They need some support. Oxford gives that support, and we feel that the ability to stay there until you feel ready, the support you get within the house, the chapter in the state, and just the living skills that you learn there prepare you for when you're ready to leave, to be successful when you do leave.
Now, what if someone is married? Does it work for them to go back home and This is the same environment they left when they had to go into alcohol treatment. Do you ever have people who maybe are married that want to stay in your place for a while to get their act together?
Absolutely.
Really?
We have that happen all the time. In fact, we've had situations where the wife goes to the women's house and the husband goes to a men's house, and they both try to get well and get through the difficulties that they're facing. But yeah, we have people from all walks of life, people that own their own homes even, that come to an Oxford because they want to be somewhere supported.
They need the support, right?
Yeah, it's not all about people who have financial issues. Oxford is very affordable. The rent in Virginia is roughly somewhere between $90 and $120 a week, which covers everything except your food and your toiletries. So it covers the phone bill, the cable, if your house is doing well. Again, once you're in an Oxford house, and the Oxford house sets its own rent, the residents decide what they're going to pay and to survive. And then when the house is full and it's matured a while, you can build up a surplus, and you can make decisions such as, well, let's get some movie channels, or let's go buy a gas grill. It's your money. It's your money. It really is. And so this kind of responsibility develops that, again, a lot of people coming into Oxford have neglected their personal finances. They don't have a driver's license, all this kind of stuff. And we're able to hook them up and help them get back in good standing with society.
Life is complicated. all the rules and licenses and regulations, it just must be a maze for someone trying to do it on their own if they've been out of it for a while.
Well, yeah, especially someone who's in early recovery. They're learning new behaviors. They're not able to cope with life the way they used to by medicating. And they're trying to learn a new way of living, and this can be a very treacherous time, and the first 90 days, 6 months even, is where you're going to see most of your relapsing, if that's going to happen. And if you can make it through that period with the support of Oxford, and of course there are other options, we're not saying we're the only option, but if you need that kind of transition time, and I believe most people do, need some kind of secure, sober living environment beyond this standard 30-day, 28-day program now with insurance companies limiting it to 28 days. Although what's the difference between 28 and 30? It's just not enough time. You're barely detoxing out of your body the poisons.
Well, yeah, that speaks to me. You've got a certain period of just getting it out of your system. It does not seem like enough time for a serious issue like that.
No, they fast track them through these various programs. And I'm not trying to be too critical, because certainly they do some good.
Right.
And anything, in my view, that helps to get people away from the destructiveness of this disease is helpful. But as far as being, I mean, the numbers speak to it, 30% or less in other cases, success rate measured on staying clean and sober once you leave these programs is not really a great number. And if you look at somebody walking into Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous just on their own with no treatment, you're less than 10% successful, and that's just a scary number.
Yes, it is. It's a scary number. Well, just as a side here for a moment, Gordon is definitely a product of Marin County, Coleman School, and Davidson Junior High, and then on to Ross School, Redwood High School. Some people may be watching who remember Gordon at school. Too bad.
I've changed.
Our bad boy has grown up. No, he was always a good student. On to UC Santa Barbara.
After College of Marin.
I'm sorry. Here I am, president of the College of Marin alumni. And I just kind of skated over that. Yes, all of my children went to College of Marin. And yes, UC Berkeley, UC Santa Barbara, and on to some good jobs.
That's what actually took me to Virginia. I was in the construction business on the marketing end of things with the company for many years. That took me from Northern California to Southern California. And then I got an offer within that industry to relocate to Virginia, and actually ended up in Norfolk, Virginia for several years, and moved up to Williamsburg in July of last year. And I really like it there. It's obviously right in the middle of the historic triangle of Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, and just learning about the origins of our nation and being part of that is really a treat. So I'm doing what I like to do, and I'm living the Oxford model in a sense also, in that I've recently taken on a full-time job with a company who is in the recovery business as their marketing manager, and I anticipate in the not too distant future relocating from Oxford into my own residence and completing the cycle of transition that we're trying to achieve here in Oxford, and that opens up my bed for someone who needs it more than I do.
You will be doing the publicity for one of the organizations that take people in for the first step of rehab, of recovery.
It's actually an organization that I worked with at Oxford and educated them about what Oxford has to offer, and it's a kind of a symbiotic relationship, in that people who come to us that might need some treatment before attempting Oxford, some detox time, some clean time, before just jumping into our system, that maybe they're not ready for a job. Because you have to be working to live in an Oxford house, or if you're on disability or some other benefits program, you have to be prepared to do some community service. There's no laying around up in your room at Oxford. And so I was out promoting Oxford to them, and they had actually, in fact, placed several residents with Oxford in the Hampton, Virginia, Williamsburg area. So the relationship continues. I've just shifted gears, and again, that's the goal of Oxford. We want to bring people in, help them get started, help them learn or relearn, get connected again, and eventually the goal is to move on back into society and become productive individuals on their own. And so that's been my experience, and a lot of it has been, I think, accelerated by my involvement in Oxford, because you don't have to be a public relations chairman or a housing services chairman. And by the way, I'm not the housing services chairman for the entire state. I'm for a certain chapter in the Williamsburg-Hampton area. There are several housing services chairmen throughout the state. I did start out as the public relations chairman, and then I stepped down from that to focus on my chapter, which needed some attention. But that's not required. You can simply be a resident of Oxford, work your program, and then move on. For me, it was just a situation where I had a job that allowed me the time to devote to Oxford. I purposely did not work full-time so that I could work on my recovery. And that's what you'll see typically in an Oxford house. People will work, but they may not work full-time, so that while they're there, they can focus on their recovery. And there are a great many people in Oxford that put in a great amount of effort to help others. And when you're doing that, you're helping yourself as well.
Now, if somebody listening wanted to find out some more information, maybe even start an Oxford house somewhere, do you have a phone number or a website or any contact information? Or?
I'm glad you asked.
Oh, okay.
Oxford is headquartered in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we do have a toll-free number nationwide, and that number is 800-689-6411.
That's the national office.
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
And you can also see us on the web at www.oxfordhouse.org.
That's simple.
And once you're there are links to other recovery-related sites, as well as state links for each individual state and down to each house location. To get into an Oxford house, you need to first select which one you want to get into, which location. You contact them and you'll need to set up an interview. Once you've gone through the interview process, hopefully you're selected, you're accepted. It's one of the few things in Oxford, it might be the only thing, that is not a majority Democratic vote. It requires 80% of the residents to get into an Oxford house, and that's because it's so important that each of the people living there...
You have to live with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Be comfortable with somebody coming in, and once you're accepted, then you need to provide the move-in fee and 2 weeks rent, and you can oftentimes move in the same day you interview. Some people come and they have nowhere to go, and Oxford will entertain emergency stay for someone who's literally has nowhere to go, and we'll try to hook them up with the right social service agency, this type of thing. We're in the business of saving lives, and so anything that we can do. It's not all about Oxford. When we go out to prisons and treatment centers, we're there to share our experience, strength, and hope, and these people see that they can recover, and they find out very quickly that we're just one of them who happens to have some distance between our disease. And when they find out that maybe 6 months or a year ago, we were just where they were, and now we found this thing that works. It's not just Oxford, it's also the 12-step programs, which are key, and the whole emphasis on that. So we don't go in there simply to promote Oxford. Certainly that's part of why we do it, but on a bigger plane, we're trying to share our experience, strength, and hope, so that people see just the strength of seeing someone who's doing this thing, and before was just like them, is very powerful.
Of course, in California, they would have to start one, except for the one in Southern California.
Right.
Because there aren't, goodness.
Well, again, the funding that would be required is fairly minuscule compared to, I'm sure, the budget that is going on right now in the recovery field. Again, I go back to the one halfway house with staff at $750,000, and how many Oxford houses you could open for that kind of money. And the other thing that I would hope California would look at is the success rates we offer, validated by a respected university. 65 to 87%, or 67 to 85%, these are numbers that we have not seen anywhere by anyone.
Now you have quite an organization, though. You've mentioned parties and events that you have with the other Oxford houses, and you have state conferences, and of course you have a lot of people. You have 65 houses in Virginia, so you have a lot of people involved.
Well, each Oxford house is a minimum of 6 residents, and we found that success of the house is and the financial options are better with more. If you can find a larger home, 10 or more people.
This is 2 to a bedroom?
Well, some houses, it depends on the structure of the house. We typically will take advantage and try to fit 2 people into a bedroom, but at the same time, some rooms are just not big enough, so they become single rooms. And so we look at the house when we're deciding whether or not to make it an Oxford house. And by the way, we lease the houses. These are not purchased by Oxford or anybody else. They're landlords, that just some of whom will only rent to Oxford because they know, number one, they're not depending on any one individual to pay the rent. and they know the house will be taken care of because we have chores and responsibilities, and we take very much pride in creating a good appearance of the home within the neighborhood because we don't want to be exposed to any criticism that we're not good neighbors, and we work very hard at this.
You've mentioned that to me before, that keeping up the yard and everything is very important so that the neighbors are happier there. And
well, it's also pride for the residents.
Right.
You know, be proud of where you live. Keep your room clean. Groom well. All these things combine to prepare you for what life is. And life isn't about not paying your bills and not mowing your lawn and not doing your laundry and cleaning up your house. All these things that we maybe didn't do such a good job of when we were out in active addiction.
do some people have a shock value with this when, they find they're expected to really, like keep their room clean when this hasn't been or, make their bed when this hasn't been one of their prime reasons for getting up?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons we have rules in an Oxford house, which we call bylaws. Mm-hmm. And these bylaws require certain standards to be kept in the house, including chores, including your private space, and if you're assigned to clean the kitchen once or twice a week, however the chores are assigned, and they rotate each week, just like the positions rotate every 6 months. But if you don't do your chore, you face financial consequences. We call fines. And if you leave dishes out in the living room, you can be fined $5 an item. If you leave your clothes in the washer overnight, you can be fined. I mean, I'm not saying you're fined every time, every little thing, but these are consequences that can occur. And again, it's because you'd think that grown men and women would take care of this stuff on their own, but the reality is that when you're using and drinking long periods of time, you don't mature emotionally, and you get into bad habits. And so we have consequences for bad behavior. And once you get fined for leaving a glass out in the living room overnight, you're not as likely to do it again.
You made me think of that movie, The Odd Couple, where the man who was a real good housewife leaves his wife and moves in with a bachelor friend who leaves dishes out in the living room and everything else.
Jack Klugman would be financially bereft if he moved into an Oxford house, I think. Again, it's not to be harsh, it's to focus on sustaining this model that we know works so well.
The developing good habits, I can relate to that.
That's right.
I should have found you when you were in high school and at home. And
I might not have gone out very often if I didn't quite understand the value of turning off lights when I left a room until I later became responsible for those bills. But it's not all about the humdrum and focusing on recovery and responsibility. We have fun. Again, you live in a house with a group of guys or gals. Most times you're socializing with them. I know that in my house we went out to movies, we went out and played billiards together, and we throw the football around, just have some fun. And then we also have functions within our chapter where some house will have a barbecue and invite all the other houses over, and we socialize, men and women, and have a good time. Then there are workshops put on by chapters and the state association, state level workshops that teach us skills in sobriety, developing skills in the positions of the house, because many people come in and it's their turn to be the comptroller and they have no idea how that works. And
that's treasurer-like, right?
Well, they're different. The treasurer is responsible for the management of money in the house. The comptroller is more specific to the collection of rent and the accounting of where people are at with their rent. He collects it and the treasurer counts it, so to speak. But these are positions that involve some training, and so when you come into an Oxford house, you maybe at first don't have a position, but you are quickly put into one, and you learn it. And we have workshops that teach that. We have workshops that teach living skills. We have speakers come in from all over the place. We have conventions every year. This past one was in Alexandria, Virginia. And so there's a great organization going on here that encourages participation not only of the residents but of the alumni. There's an active alumni organization that provides financial support, but not so much that as support in terms of how to run a house. They attend the workshops, they attend the association meetings, they serve on the state association. They are free to attend house meetings and teach people how to run a house correctly. And then when it comes time to open a new Oxford house, I mean, the methodology of Oxford is recovery, responsibility, replication. Certainly 65 houses in Virginia is not enough. We have waiting lists in many areas.
Waiting lists?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that can be very frustrating. You finally made this decision and you can't get in. And here again, we're talking about people's lives. And so the ultimate goal for an Oxford house is, and a resident, recovery, responsibility, replication. By replication, we mean a house becomes successful, builds up a surplus, saves up money, uses that money to open another house. And then when we open a new house, we usually will seed it, if you will, with more experienced residents who understand the system of operations, the various positions, how to pay bills, how to manage a bank account, how to attract new residents, how to be proactive in getting your beds filled. And that's actually one of the reasons I ended up in Williamsburg, because I was in Chesapeake and we were opening a new house in Williamsburg, and I was asked to move into it to help get through that period of time where there are only one or two people in the house, and you have these responsibilities to get furniture, to secure additional residents, to get the house full, and to train everybody on how to run this business, because it really is each house is autonomous in terms of financial survival.
And also, I remember you told me that each person takes care of their own cooking, their own food, whatever. You don't have a resident cook that does it all for you.
No, that's another one. You've got in most houses 2 or 3 refrigerators.
Wow, yeah.
And extra cupboard space, either negotiated with the lease or built in by the residents. And you're responsible for your own food. And so in some houses they have systems where one guy will cook for the group, or just on an occasional basis. But for the most part, you're on your own. And
you ever had anybody starve to death?
no, but I think there's a lot of people who are just surviving on top ramen. But
TV dinners.
Yeah, TV dinners. Frozen food is big. Yeah, and yeah, you see various habits, but I think that that's a good thing. Again, you're a lot of times maybe not used to all that, preparing your own meals, and sometimes you just continue those habits, but I don't think those are destructive as some of the other habits we have.
Oh, well, in a group situation, you maybe could learn from some of the guys that, know how to whip up a stew or whatever.
We see it all the time, and I know that in my house we'll get a turkey and we'll cook it up, and everybody will participate in that, and it'll last a couple of days, and so it's just a fellowship opportunity to share meals.
You were always a good cook, Gordon.
Yeah, I had no problems. Everybody's kind of wanting me to cook them now.
I bet.
That doesn't happen too very often, but I will do it, and for the most part, we'll sit around and we'll share with each other in our meetings. in our weekly house meetings. We have an opportunity after that to share, just as we do at any time, but that's a time where we can all talk about how we're doing in our program, how we're feeling. So it's not just about the house operations, but we're talking to each other. And, what's going on with you, and how are things going? And you can, in an Oxford house, it's a unique situation, not unlike Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, where you can talk to a sponsor who isn't going to laugh at you when you share your feelings. And you think you've got a bunch of macho guys or tough girls, but when it comes down to this disease, we're all hurting.
That's right. And
we can share where we're at and know that we're not going to be made fun of, and that the people there are really actually going to try to do their best to help us. And I think that again, that's a big key for Oxford, this sense of community that develops friendships and support. And
might be the first nurturing space that some of these people ever had.
Truly. Truly, I know of several people that have never lived anywhere but home, or were on their own all the time. They ran away from home, or whatever it might be. They didn't have this kind of environment where they were comfortable. See, an Oxford house should be somewhere where you come at the end of the day and you know it's home. You're comfortable, you're not dreading it. No one's going to be critical of you, and I think that's a huge part of why it's so successful, because it is a home. An Oxford house is a house, it's a home, inhabited by people just like you, who are trying to do the same thing you are, and really looking out for each other.
Gordon, why don't you give the telephone number and the website, if you've got that handy, and in case anybody wants to make any further inquiries about this.
Okay. Well, our national 800 number is, again, 1-800-689-6411. And I can also give you my number in Virginia, which is 757-645-2397. And I'd be happy to help anybody and give them any information anytime. And also we have our national website, which is www.oxfordhouse.org. And that will give you links to all the various states.
Well, we just have a few minutes left. I'd like to say that Public Advocate is on in the Novato Public Access Television on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock, and we're on the Channel 26 in the rest of Marin the first Monday at 6 o'clock. However, in September we will be on the first Wednesday because of the holiday at 6 o'clock. So we have a few more minutes. Gordon, have we really overlooked anything? I want to say that not only have we heard the rules and the bylaws, I think that we've gotten a feel for the aura, the ambiance of the place from Gordon, who really feels that it's a very nurturing site, and I think you've been able to very successfully convey that to people who may be listening, that just what it does. It isn't just, hey, we got this house here and it'll cost you X number of dollars to move in. I mean, you and obviously others see it a little different from that, of it just being a house to live in.
Yeah, you don't get this, welcome to Oxford House, take off your shoes. It's a supportive situation, and I just, having gone through it myself, and I can speak to that, and having seen it with others, I can speak to that, and I just see one of the great joys I get in working with Oxford House and new residents as the Housing Service Chair. Part of my responsibility is to train new people, and also to find new people and direct people who call and try to get them help. And I see people that have come in with nothing, shell-shocked, and then I see them 6 months later and they're back, living life again, and it's a great feeling. And I don't spend the volunteer time I spend because I am looking for any fame. It's really about helping people, which helps me, and we're there for that. We're that kind of an organization.
And you're making friends, and like you say, the alumni groups, I think that's just great.
Today tend to socialize with people that are doing the same kind of thing I'm doing. And not that I have anything against people who aren't alcoholics and addicts, but people in recovery are who I spend most of my time with. I have friends who are not, and but it's just a great feeling to be around that. It's a nice thing to be able to work in that environment too, which keeps me connected.
Well, it's amazing to me the way this started with just two people saying, well, let's just try it on our own. And then they had the imagination to get others involved. And I mean, you know this gentleman, he's back in your area, who started it. Does he ever look shocked at what happened with their idea?
I don't think he is. I think he was convinced of it from the beginning. He was connected on Capitol Hill. He got legislation to allow Oxford to be exempt from certain zoning laws and landlord-tenant laws, and got a lot of support for these revolving loan programs created by the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988 with Ronald Reagan. And he's very intelligent man, and yet he was a man who lived in a dumpster at one point in his life.
Right.
So I mean, he's been there, done that, and now he's leading this type of an organization. I don't think it surprises him at all.
Well, it's certainly a wonderful story, and Gordon, you tell it very well. And we're speaking for the family. We're happy to have Gordon back for a few days visiting with us, and I'm so pleased that we could put this together to bring his message to the community, which he certainly brought to the people of Virginia. So now he's coming back home and bringing it here. And I want to thank you very much, Gordon. We have about 1 minute left. Would you like to wave goodbye or something?
I'd just like to say how terrific it is to be on your show. We don't get it in Virginia, but I've certainly seen the many tapes that you've sent me, and I love what you're doing and the various causes you're involved with, and I appreciate this opportunity to talk about an organization that's been such a big part of my life. And thank you for what you're doing here with the Public Advocate.
Well, thank you, Gordon, and you're certainly going to have a video to take home. And if anyone who's interested in starting one of these or learning more about it, contact the Oxford House, and we'll see that you get a video to share with with whoever is important to you that might be helping you on it, because Gordon's given a very good explanation all. And for Public Advocate and for Gordon, I'd like to say bye-bye and thank you for watching.